This is CBC Nova Scotia News.
No new evidence. A weekend search fails to find more clues about two missing Pictou County children. Mining meeting. A big crowd gathers in Hants County to voice their concerns about possible uranium exploration. And parenting and professional sports. How two local athletes are making it work.
Well, the sky will continue to clear later this evening and overnight. That sets us up for a very nice Tuesday. As for how the rest of our first week of June is shaping up, I'll have your full forecast just ahead.
Search and rescue crews returned to Pictou County over the weekend to look for Lily and Jack Sullivan. The young siblings have now been missing for a month after they wandered away from their home in Lansdowne Station. The CBC's Cassidy Chisholm has the latest on the search efforts.
It's been 1 month since two young children vanished without a trace in rural Nova Scotia. 6-year-old Lily Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack Sullivan were reported missing from their home in Lansdowne Station on May 2nd. This past weekend, ground search and rescue crews were brought back to the area. Nova Scotia RCMP said they returned to focus on specific spots around Gairloch Road and the nearby pipeline trail, where a boot print was found during the initial search.
The boot print was on the pipeline, which is why we're extending our search efforts down the pipeline. We don't know for sure it was from the children, but it's the only real thing we've had to go on thus far, so we're just kind of investigating that further.
Hansen said about 65 people were in the woods on Saturday and Sunday, and 3 drones were also deployed to help. RCMP said a total of 8.5 square kilometers has been grid searched. But as of Sunday afternoon, Hansen said there weren't any new finds, and the search was suspended again. Hansen said any decision to bring searchers back depends on the RCMP.
We're always willing to come back if new information comes up. So it's never done, and it's always an open investigation with the RCMP as well. So if they find something that leads us to a new direction, they'll call us back out again.
On Friday, the children's stepfather said their disappearance has taken a toll on him and his family.
They have over 12,000 man-hours searching the woods, and they're planning on doing more, which I'm really grateful for.
He and police are asking anyone with footage or information to come forward. Cassidy Chisholm, CBC News, Halifax.
Search and rescue volunteers were in the Truro area over the weekend looking for Dylan Ehler, a 3-year-old child who was last seen 5 years ago. He was reported missing in May of 2020. A dozen volunteers from the national organization Please Bring Me Home concluded their search along with community members and the boy's father. Ehler was last seen playing in his grandmother's yard on Elizabeth Street. Police say Dylan Ehler's disappearance remains an active investigation. A woman who was standing next to Pat Stay when he was fatally stabbed says it all started with a verbal altercation and a shove. Bryn McKenzie was testifying today at the murder trial of Adam Drake, the man accused of killing Stay in September of 2022. McKenzie was working as a server at the Yacht Club Social, the downtown Halifax bar where Stay was attacked. McKenzie says Stay entered the bar and made his way to the VIP section at the back. She says he greeted almost everyone there with handshakes, hugs, or fist bumps. The one exception was someone McKenzie described as a white man wearing a white shirt. Other witnesses have identified him as Adam Drake. McKenzie said the two men exchanged words and Stay shoved Drake. She said she didn't see a weapon or the stabbing. Residents in central Nova Scotia are getting together to voice concerns about the possibility of uranium mining returning to their area. The province lifted the ban earlier this year and last month put out a call for companies to explore 3 areas in Nova Scotia with known uranium deposits, including in Hants County. The CBC's Josh Hoffman attended a public meeting there to speak to residents.
Uranium mining in Hants County is such a hot-button issue. There wasn't enough room for everyone who showed up for a grassroots meeting on Saturday. This is one of several meetings taking place in this area as residents look for more information. For many, it's an opportunity to voice their opposition to Nova Scotia once again allowing uranium exploration. That's because this community is right next to one of 3 areas with known uranium deposits in the province that the Nova Scotia government wants companies to come in and explore and possibly extract the ground, then to leave it there. Natural Resource Minister Tory Rushton has said any mining projects could be decades away. but he believes there is a huge demand for critical minerals around the world that are mined responsibly, ethically, and sustainably. Several residents at Saturday's meeting believe there is no safe way to operate a mine so close to communities.
I think it doesn't matter where in Nova Scotia we live. It's important to speak up against this undesirable, incredible proposal. And I do have history in Mardick and Windsor Forks and live in Windsor. And I know that it doesn't just stay in one small area. Uranium is not safe to have disturbed at all.
Another meeting is scheduled later this week in nearby Lake Paul. Organizers expect another large turnout ahead of the June 11th deadline for mining companies to apply for exploration rights. This area has a history of opposing uranium mining. Efforts by residents in the 1970s led to the province imposing a moratorium in 1981, which was eventually turned into the outright ban. And people here are hoping the province will hear their voices again. Josh Hoffman, CBC News, Vaughan, Nova Scotia.
The Nova Scotia Liberal Party has released the rules for its leadership race next year. The party has had an interim leader since it was reduced to 2 seats following the last provincial election. Voting will last for a week in November of 2026. The new leader will be announced at a convention later the same month. The deadline for candidates to enter the race is July 28, 2026. And Jay is in for Ryan, and after a wet weekend, it's nice to see the sun come back.
Yeah, that sunshine was welcome today after some very soggy, unsettled conditions, even some thunderstorms on Saturday. We had some very strong winds as well into Sunday. Chance to dry out, calm things down to start off our first full week of June. And temperatures were underperforming today, but we'll see a return to seasonal temperatures, even above seasonal in a few spots tomorrow. As that sky continues to clear late this evening, we'll look at a clear sky overnight, aside from the chance for some patchy fog to develop in places. So something to keep in mind into the early morning hours tomorrow. Where the fog develops could mean a little bit of low cloud cover in the early morning. Most areas, though, should start out mainly sunny in the morning, likely to stay that way through the afternoon. The wind does pick up from the southwest, 15 gusting to 30 kilometers per hour, but that is a warmer wind direction. Should see those temperatures for inland areas up into the low 20s, and we'll start to cool off into the evening hours tomorrow, but holding on to those sunnier conditions. And as for what that means for the rest of our first full week of June, I'll be back with your long-range forecast in just a bit.
All right, we'll talk then. Thanks, Jay.
You got it.
In the last few years, nonprofit groups around the country have been working to provide affordable housing. Many are buying buildings or finishing construction, but once they're rented, they can be expensive to keep running. And that has some nonprofits asking themselves tough questions about their future. Shayna Luck reports.
How are you, Peggy?
Nancy O'Regan needs a lot of building supplies. She's on the board of an affordable housing nonprofit called Community First. It bought a building to provide homes for 7 people, much cheaper than the private market. But it's costly to operate. O'Regan and all the other board members are volunteers. There's no money to hire staff. She says it's not sustainable.
There's no pots of money that come along with doing this work. I worry about, board member burnout.
In the last few years, all levels of government have created programs to help nonprofits buy or build. But once they become property owners, the organizations must manage their finances on their own, while charging lower rent than the private market. Some make up the difference by fundraising, but that's a tall order for the Guysborough Group.
Everyone is working a lot, and if I had to add a layer of fundraising to those efforts to build affordable housing, I'm concerned about the sustainability of the organizations.
This nonprofit in Antigonish already operates 28 units at a loss. Colleen Cameron is the board chair, another volunteer.
Our operations is not breaking even with the rental income that we have. So that's being supplemented through fundraising and grants that we can get.
There is another way. Some nonprofits charge market rent on some of their units to subsidize the lower cost ones. The Antigonish Society grappled with it for more than a year, but made a decision in May.
We're realizing we cannot build affordable housing and be sustainable without having market rents included.
They will include some market units in their next development to support the rest. Proponents argue that can result in more vibrant neighborhoods that are better for everyone, but it means fewer of the low-cost units. Back in Guysborough County, the plan is to build right here. If they charge market rent on some apartments, that would mean more income to expand. But Nancy O'Regan isn't sold yet.
I'm concerned about it because I know we need a lot of affordable housing. It's going to take us so much longer to get there if we have to do that.
She worries time is short.
This is a decision our board's going to be faced with, within the next half year.
Shayna Luck, CBC News, Guysborough, Nova Scotia.
Canada Post is refusing to go into binding arbitration. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers made the request, saying having a third party review offers from both sides would be fair. But the Crown Corporation says that process is too long and complicated. Instead, Canada Post wants the government to force employees to vote on a final deal. The union says forcing a government-imposed vote would not bring lasting labor peace. An historic Nova Scotia schooner has been placed on a dry dock in Lunenburg, awaiting possible refurbishment. The Teresa E. Connor was removed from its berth outside the Fisheries Museum of the Atlantic in February and is now at the Lunenburg shipyard to assess several structural issues. The 85-year-old schooner is one of Canada's oldest. Records show it traveled the Grand Banks and launched fishing dories to fish for cod. Competing in professional sports is hard, but it is especially hard when you're a parent and have to figure out childcare, traveling, and expenses. Juliana Grillo spoke with two athletes who are making it work, but say more support should be available.
The Halifax Tide's coach room is filled with soccer balls, water bottles, and a baby playpen. Goalie Ari McLeod and team captain Guni Jonsdottir bring their 7-month-old baby, Baldwin, to practice with them. As the old proverb says, it takes a village to raise a child, and in their case, it takes a team.
Our team's been fantastic. They're more comfortable now, so I think when they see that Gunny and I are trying to eat, but we're also trying to hold Baldwin, someone will take him and take care of him for us while we finish our meal, and those kind of things have really come in handy.
After more than 20 years playing, McLeod says many of her former teammates had to step aside to raise a family. So she considers it a privilege to achieve her dream of participating in the inaugural season of Canada's Women's Professional Soccer League while raising a kid. But it comes with challenges.
We have to find nannies, basically, or people to take care of Baldwin when we're playing games and training in different cities. It's probably been the biggest challenge. Financially, it's not easy when we're professional soccer players, and I know this league has really pushed for us to have great salaries, but there's still ways to go.
McLeod says she and her teammates are advocating for the league to introduce a stipend to help players who are raising children. It's an issue Olympic sprint kayaker Genevieve Orn is familiar with. When she gave birth to her daughter in 2013, she was back on the water just 2 weeks later. Since then, she says she had to fight to keep her seat on the national team. And when traveling North America for competitions, she often had to pay out of pocket for separate accommodations that allowed her to bring her child a nanny. That put a financial strain on her family.
We were making what we spent, so I think we ended up borrowing against the house for some dollars to make my dream happen.
Orden says it was all worth it in the end. But she'd like to see more teams offer financial support so athletes don't have to choose between chasing their dreams and raising a family. Juliana Grillo, CBC News, Halifax.
All right, is their sunshine going to continue for the rest of the week? Jay's up next with the weather forecast. We'll see you in a bit.
The weather update is brought to you by Tourisme Gaspésie. Plan your stay in Gaspésie at tourismegaspésie.com and enjoy extraordinary moments.
All right, Jay, I know you're getting a lot of questions about the Northern Lights and when people can maybe see them. What are the odds?
Yeah, I mean, last night the KP index, that's the rating, and it doesn't always work out to a great show, a great celestial show, that is. But I think it was higher last night than tonight. But I believe it's a 5 or higher. So late this evening, once the sun does set, and through the overnight hours tonight, if you can get away from the city lights, and the sky is clear enough, no fog develops where you are, there is a chance, if you look towards the northern horizon, that you may see the aurora borealis tonight. So we can see parts of northern New Brunswick up into the Gaspé Peninsula. This is where it may even be visible overhead. But as we look down towards most of the Maritimes, including across Nova Scotia, likely looking towards the northern horizon. So you'll need an unobstructed view, and make sure you're away from any light pollution. Not sure it's worth staying up overnight for, but if you're up anyway, there's your heads up. You may get a chance to see the Northern Lights. Certainly not like, I think it was late May last year, we had that very vibrant display. It's not expected to be that high, but these forecasts tend to sometimes swing wildly for or against seeing the lights overhead. But looking to maybe see that show towards the northern horizon. And we should see, not in terms of the potential for fog, there is patchy fog possible, but above Nova Scotia, above the province, we should see a very clear sky tonight with a ridge of high pressure in place. Daytime highs today underperformed, but seeing that return of sunnier skies was really nice. And we'll continue to see that clearing trend over the next few hours, and certainly after midnight, that sky will be mainly clear to really almost no cloud cover to speak of through the overnight hours. You may see a few more cloudy periods, likely in the form of fog as we look to more coastal areas. May see some cloud cover developing into the morning hours for folks as we look to Cape Breton. But for the most part, we're starting out mainly sunny, aside from that chance of fog patches. There's the passing clouds through Cape Breton mid-morning through mid-afternoon. Otherwise, mainly sunny sky across the province for your Tuesday. And we're clear Tuesday night into Wednesday morning. Should see a very sunny start to the day on Wednesday as well, but we can see some cloud cover building to our west over New Brunswick, and we'll watch for those clouds through the afternoon and evening to start to build in across mainland Nova Scotia, later Cape Breton as well. So I would say more of a mix of sun and cloud for Wednesday. Likely going to see similar weather into Thursday as well. So sunny, mild, not too windy, and that breeze will be coming from a warmer wind direction, at least for your Tuesday, for tomorrow. Now, through the overnight hours tonight, most areas are looking to be between 7 and 8 degrees, so we are looking at some cooler conditions tonight, but that is because of that clear sky. With the wind fairly light through the overnight hours tonight, do be mindful that some fog patches will be possible, and temperatures may be a smidge cooler as well for inland areas. As we take a look at our daytime highs tomorrow, most areas away from the water, and that wind will be coming in from the southwest, should be up into the low 20s tomorrow. Not much in terms of humidity, but a lot of sunshine in the forecast tomorrow. Maybe a few cloudy periods for eastern areas, namely Cape Breton. But still more sun than cloud there, and a high UV index to very high UV index across mainland Nova Scotia, so across most of the province tomorrow as well. So very nice conditions, just a little cooler if you're immediately downwind of the water, with that wind coming in out of the south to southwest and increasing into the afternoon. Sustained 15 to 20, could see gusts 20 to even over 30 kilometers per hour possible. So as we take a look at how the next few days are shaping up, really not that bad. I really wish we could take this weather and move it back to the weekend, or carry it ahead to the weekend, as you'll see in just a moment on the 7-day forecast. But just considering how many parts of Canada are dealing with fire, that fire risk across the Maritimes is low to moderate right now because of the wet weather we saw over the weekend. So rain, the timing of it on the weekend is not always great, but it is a welcome thing, and certainly something we'd like to see in other parts of Canada. So we're not going to complain too much about the sunnier conditions falling midweek, milder temperatures as well. We do see a few cloudy periods Wednesday and Thursday, and then as we get into your Friday and the weekend, late day rain on Friday, showers, even some steadier periods of rain possible both Saturday and Sunday. Temperatures will cool off as a result as well. So the rain, not exactly when most folks want it, but I think rain really not a bad thing, as it does keep that fire risk low and it keeps those lawns green. Amy?
Very true. All right. Thank you, Jay. We're back after this. Many Nova Scotia Power customers who recently found out their personal information was stolen in a ransomware attack have a lot of questions, including what NSP's legal responsibilities are in the wake of the data breach. And for a closer look at this, we're joined by Wayne McKay, Professor Emeritus at Dalhousie Law School. So thank you.
No problem.
Who was responsible for monitoring that Nova Scotia Power is doing everything right in the wake of this?
Oddly enough, in a way, it's the Canadian Federal Privacy Commissioner under the federal statute that regulates information collected by private companies as part of commercial activity. So it's mainly the Federal Privacy Commissioner, and under that statute, as they exercise their authority and make them accountable.
So do you think customers can take some comfort that somebody's watching them?
Well, yes, I think they can, in the sense that one of the roles of that agency in a case like this is to make sure they're doing everything they can to protect information, use it in the right way, be transparent, all those kind of things. And their role is to regulate and ensure that happens. But all they can do, or what they do if there is a violation, is fine the company. They don't give any remedies to customers.
Mm-hmm. Well, some of the folks who had their information taken, their SIN numbers, their social insurance numbers were gone. Were you surprised that Nova Scotia Power had them, I guess, in the first place?
I was very surprised, and like every Nova Scotian who might have been caught by this, wondering if I had given it. I didn't remember that. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I did or didn't, but a lot of people did. And that is, of course, critical information to do a whole lot of other things with. And I was very surprised that they would even ask for that.
Mm-hmm. And going forward, what would you like to see in terms of people giving out their social insurance numbers? Be very careful, right?
Absolutely. I mean, really, other than the Tax Revenue Canada, when you shorts them, there aren't too many people that really should have a right to ask for your SIN number. And it's always wise to not do that. And I've seen I think I've heard and seen that they are not going to be doing that anymore, which is a good thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, what about, class action lawsuits? People are wondering, can I take some power in this and do it myself or join a suit? Is that likely to happen?
Well, that's a tricky question, as lots of times legal things are. But if we were in BC, the answer would be yes, that they have a provincial privacy statute that regulates commercial activity and private information there. That does allow class actions, or would at least allow them to be registered, and allow people to sue without having to prove damage, and that's a big factor. But even more importantly, allow them to sue the person who holds the data, not just the hacker. So in Nova Scotia, you can sue the hacker, in theory, if you knew who they were, which we don't, of course, but that would be not likely very successful. And in Nova Scotia, they're the ones, and in fact, they're the ones invading the privacy. So that would not work even as a civil action for breach of privacy, because the actual breach came from the hacker. So that's very important that we do not have that kind of statutory protection.
And even if Nova Scotia Power customers were able to do that, would they even get very much in a class action lawsuit?
Well, that's another whole question, because even though if there were such a statute, even though they don't have to prove precise damage, it would still be difficult to prove a direct connection, because hackers use all kinds of information. So it would be a difficult thing either way, but at least that would give some protection. And perhaps even more importantly, that would be a real motivation for those holding the information, such as Nova Scotia Power, to be very careful about what they do with that information, how they secure that information, which I'm not saying they don't, I presume they are, but it would require even higher standards, because they don't want to get sued and lose all kinds of money. So it would be an added incentive to prevent the problem happening in the first place, as well as an avenue for getting some compensation.
Now, Nova Scotia Power's president said they have cyber insurance, so it won't be coming out of ratepayers' pockets to recover that. But that doesn't help somebody whose information has been taken.
It doesn't, and actually, even though it's not necessarily a large thing, a lot of the people dealing with this and doing as they suggest are also using a lot of time, a lot of effort, getting a lot of frustration, waiting on long lines and so on. So even if in the end your information is not used fraudulently, all kinds of people have been inconvenienced and required to spend time dealing with it. So there's some definite losses here that probably will not be compensated.
And if you sign up with the credit monitoring service that they're offering, you get notified that something has happened, but then what?
Well, that's another good point. It's not like they can prevent it in advance. It's dealing with saying, we will tell you if you've got a problem after the fact, but they're not offering anything in advance. And one of the things I would hope that the Privacy Commissioner's investigation into Nova Scotia Power would do is look closely at what security measures they currently have in place and in what ways they could be improved. And we've already talked about one of those, that is no longer asking for social insurance numbers or SIN numbers would be one small way of improving it. And also, I was rather surprised to hear them say that they didn't delete them if they're using them to verify, and once they're verified, why hang on to it after that? So that may not just be an issue with that one piece of data. Is that true with other data which they could dispose of as soon as they no longer need it?
Before I let you go, do you have any advice for people going forward? Because, our information is out there and needed by quite a few organizations.
Well, it is. I mean, I guess my main advice would be to certainly follow any directions you have about how to protect yourself, such as signing up with TransUnion or Equifax or these various credit agencies, and also changing as many, but certainly your banking passwords and all those kind of things, because even if you were lucky enough to not have any problems, it's not going to hurt to do that. And if you are unlucky and do have problems, it's a very problematic thing for identity theft and all kinds of things. So do everything you can and push the power company to do everything they can to prevent more problems.
All right, well, some good advice there. Thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
No problem. Thanks very much.
Coming up, Canada's premiers meet face-to-face with Mark Carney for the first time since the federal election. And the situation remains dire for thousands of people impacted by wildfires across the prairie provinces. Welcome back. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Saskatoon for his first in-person meeting with the provincial premiers since the federal election. And it couldn't be more important. The nation's top political leaders are discussing ways to strengthen the Canadian economy in the face of U.S. tariffs and the talk of making this country the 51st state. The CBC's Marina von Stackelberg has the details on the proposals and the positive vibes so far.
Everyone. Love is in the air.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford crooning alongside Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. The relationship between the provinces and the federal government hasn't always been loving, but they're trying to make it work, especially as Canada aims to build a stronger and more independent economy as it faces down U.S. threats.
The leadership around this table of developing truly nation-building projects. And this is just the start. This is just the start.
Prime Minister Mark Carney asked each premier to come with their pitches to fast-track infrastructure and energy projects. Smith wants pipelines to move Alberta's oil to the coast and to new markets.
This is not just an ideological argument. It's not just a minor disagreement. Oil is by far the most valuable export for Canada.
But a pipeline would likely need buy-in from provinces along the route, like BC and Quebec.
First, I've been invited here by Mr. Carney, not by Danielle or whoever.
Quebec has historically opposed those projects, but Premier François Legault says they'd look at the proposals.
We need to see what's the economic impact for Quebec, what is the impact on the environment.
The premiers have other projects they want Ottawa to approve or fund. Quebec and Newfoundland and Labrador have plans to transport their hydroelectricity to markets in Atlantic Canada and beyond. And Premier Doug Ford wants money for nuclear reactors and to mine critical minerals in Northern Ontario.
We're going to be an energy superpower around the world. Those are our strengths, and we're going to make sure that we deliver that message, and I know the Prime Minister feels the same way.
Carney has already promised to remove any federal barriers to internal trade by Canada Day. Those restrictions have often made it easier to trade with the U.S. than between provinces, costing the Canadian economy as much as $200 billion a year. Marina von Stackelberg, CBC News, Ottawa.
As wildfires rage across Western Canada, thousands of people are on the move. But finding space for all of those evacuees is proving challenging, with some having to travel as far as Niagara Falls to find a vacant bed. Cameron McIntosh has more.
Airlifted to safety, the military has now flown about 3,200 people away from northern Manitoba's wildfires, including hundreds from Puckatawagan, Matthias Colomb Cree Nation.
So far, I've only had maybe 3 hours, 4 hours of rest since we left Puck.
Mary Sylvia Caribou leaving on just a few hours' notice, now living in a temporary shelter at a soccer complex in Winnipeg.
As long as we have our food and water, everything is fine. Yeah.
Similar scenes in Peguis First Nation, the hockey rink, now a shelter.
Can I talk to Caitlin?
Beverly Scatch, happy to be here with her young grandson, now trying to reach her daughter, a firefighter who stayed behind.
I'm so proud of her. She's doing this for her kids too and people back home.
In Manitoba, about 17,000 people are out of their homes, another 8,000 in Saskatchewan and about 5,000 in Alberta. Figuring out where to put everyone, now a big challenge. Manitoba is sending some evacuees out of province. These evacuees being put up in Niagara Falls.
Just lucky to be here, to have a spot, to have a bed.
Not everyone is happy. These evacuees protesting outside the First Minister's meeting, calling Manitoba's fire response unorganized, as some Manitoba chiefs call on the province to use emergency powers to clear more hotel space.
They don't take Red Cross evacuees, and it's unfortunate. And our people have experienced that, and they don't need that. Our people do not need that. They need to be afforded the basic human dignity.
Manitoba's premier says more room will be found.
Let's face the facts. Nobody wants to sleep on a cot for more than a day or two, even in an emergency situation.
As the fires spread, it's likely there will be even more evacuations. Back in Peguis, Beverly Scatch sees tough days ahead.
I have to be strong though for my grandson.
The fire's still out of control. It could be weeks before many evacuees can go home. That's if they still have a home to return to. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Winnipeg.
The suspect in a violent attack in Boulder, Colorado on Sunday has been charged with a federal hate crime, accused of using a flamethrower and Molotov cocktails on a group of people at a Jewish event to show support for hostages in Gaza. Sasha Petrusik reports.
As 45-year-old Mohammed Solomon faces a judge in Boulder, Colorado this afternoon, he is facing more charges. We already know that he's charged with a whole list of offenses, including hate crimes, assault, and 8 counts of murder. In Colorado, you don't have to actually kill someone to be charged with murder, so they're going ahead with that. This comes after yesterday's attack on a group of demonstrators in Boulder pushing for the release of Israeli hostages held in Gaza. Witnesses say he attacked the demonstrators with a flamethrower and an incendiary device, screaming, "Free Palestine." 8 people are in hospital, some with serious injuries. Most of them are seniors, one of them a Holocaust survivor. And this is how some of the eyewitnesses describe the scene.
Look over and see this guy just shirtless, screaming stuff.
All of a sudden I felt the heat, like it was a Molotov cocktail equivalent, a gas bomb in a glass jar thrown. I saw it, a big flame as high as a tree, and all I saw was someone on fire.
Now, the FBI has filed an affidavit with the court saying Solomon has confessed and that he told them in an interview that he'd been planning this attack for a year, plus that he'd do it all over again. Now, all of this is not only a legal issue, but it's also a political issue in the United States. Solomon is an Egyptian national who arrived in the U.S. 3 years ago on a tourist visa and never left after his papers expired. Today in Washington, President Donald Trump jumped on this sensitive political issue, blaming former President Joe Biden for allowing Solomon in the first place, and then posting on social media that he, Donald Trump, will deport illegal anti-American radicals from our homeland. That's what he said. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Washington.
A second round of direct talks between Russia and Ukraine ended quickly in Turkey on Monday, with no progress going forward. Now, hopes for a deal faded over the weekend, with both sides launching a string of stunning attacks. Willem Marks reports.
The delegations from Russia and Ukraine met inside a palace in Istanbul and began their talks 2 hours later than expected without explanation. The conversations lasted less than an hour, overseen by the Foreign Ministry of Turkey. Following the talks, the major breakthrough involved a potential prisoner swap that would see hundreds of forces from both sides changing hands, as well as many hundreds, if not thousands, of Ukrainian war dead returned by Russian authorities. However, both sides disagreed on what kind of ceasefire would be possible. The Ukrainians, ahead of the talks, had demanded a 30-day unconditional ceasefire. The Russians responded in a press conference following the conversations. They would be prepared for 2 or 3 days of ceasefire, but only in specific locations. The Turkish President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, saying the talks did go well, but also insisting that the leaders of both sides, President Putin and Zelensky, would be needed to carry these conversations forward. The negotiations followed what may have been the most audacious Ukrainian assault of the war, with dozens of drones attacking air bases hundreds, sometimes thousands of kilometers inside Russian territory, and destroying, the Ukrainians said, dozens of long-range bomber aircraft. Meanwhile, the Russian forces had continued to use drones, hundreds of them, almost 500 in fact, to attack Ukrainian towns and cities over the course of the weekend in what was the largest scale such attack of the conflict. The prospects for long-term peace, as would be guaranteed by the United States and Europe, remain very, very distant. Willem Marks, CBC News, London.
Court has been adjourned until next Monday in the sexual assault trial of 5 former World Junior hockey players. Lawyers for the Crown and defense are set to make closing arguments beginning next week. The CBC's Ali Chiasson has more from the courthouse in London, Ontario.
They rest their case. All 5 defense attorneys wrapped up today. The Crown had no further submissions, so that means they all take the rest of the week to prepare their closing arguments, which begin on Monday. Still, though, today did have some interesting testimony to tell you about. Dan Brown, the defense attorney for Alex Formanton, called up Detective Lindsay Ryan. She led the second investigation in the case that resulted in the charges against the 5 accused hockey players, all of whom who have pleaded not guilty to sexual assault. Brown asks if she did a criminal background check on their client. She did. He has no criminal record. They chose to end it there. Carter Hart's lawyer does pose a few questions to the detective, honing in on the difference in EM's demeanor in 2018 talking to police and years later. Detective Ryan says that in the 2018 statement, EM appeared to be, quote, self-blaming and not sure if what happened was wrong, while in the Hockey Canada statement, she seems to understand how she felt and that what happened in that room was wrong. Detective Ryan attributed that to 4 years going by and EM being able to process and reflect with the passage of time. Another interesting point came up from the Crown, asking Detective Ryan about EM's reaction when she was informed that they would be reopening the case. She said the complainant was quite upset, and the detective took that to mean that she was reopening old wounds as well. And to that, we heard some of the accused family members gasp, even scoff. Then we were waiting to see whether Dylan Dubé or Cal Foote would testify for themselves like Carter Hart did last week, but their counsel opted not to call any witnesses. Foote's lawyer, Juliana Greenspan, said they're holding the Crown to their burden of proof and left it there. So what will these closing arguments look like? For more on that, we spoke with Christopher Sharon.
Judge-alone closing submissions tend to be a little more businesslike and efficient. That doesn't mean you can't add a little bit of flourish, but it tends to be fairly businesslike. It is truly the opportunity to present the picture that you think is the best picture of the evidence to the judge in a succinct, coherent, persuasive form.
Closing submissions start Monday. Ali Chiasson, CBC News, London, Ontario.
The union representing Via Rail workers says contract talks have broken off. Unifor says another week of bargaining in Montreal has not produced a tentative agreement. CBC is seeking comment from management. 2,500 Via Rail workers gave themselves an overwhelming strike mandate a week ago. If a deal is not reached, the union and Via Rail are in a legal strike or lockout position as of June 22nd. A British Columbia man is going public with his story of credit card fraud and the shocking realization he wasn't protected. Someone charged thousands of dollars to his Visa without his approval, but after reporting the problem, his bank says he was liable. Erica Johnson has that story.
Jordan Judge wasn't expecting 2 charges totaling nearly $20,000 on his Scotiabank Visa card last fall.
Well, it was definitely astonishment.
An almost $18,000 charge to a British university he'd never heard of, more than $1,800 to someone he didn't know.
I wasn't worried at the time because I knew it wasn't my charge and I couldn't be held accountable for it.
Or so he thought. He disputed the charges, but Scotia pinned the blame on him, saying evidence suggests he must have disclosed one-time passwords sent to his phone. Judge did receive one password needed to approve that $18,000 charge, but it said do not share with anyone, so he insists he didn't. This lawyer and consumer advocate says the bank can't just say Judge is liable.
One would like to see more in terms of actual evidence demonstrating that the customer was negligent rather than an assertion.
Credit card customers are supposed to be protected under the Bank Act, which sets the maximum liability for unauthorized charges at $50, unless a customer is grossly negligent with their personal information. A cybersecurity expert read the letter Scotiabank sent to Judge and says they don't provide proof their customer did anything wrong.
The bank has provided no evidence of any logs or any sequence of events that has been timestamped or reviewed in any way.
And while Scotiabank insists that texting a password has a proven track record in mitigating fraudulent activities, POPA disagrees.
It's vulnerable to a number of different types of compromises.
The university behind the $18,000 charge says the bank never contacted them, but after Go Public reached out, it reversed the charge. And after repeated inquiries from Go Public, Scotiabank quietly reimbursed the other charge and all the interest. While things end well for Judge, the cybersecurity expert says in the face of rising fraud, financial institutions need to do a better job of investigating and providing clear evidence before claiming the customer is to blame. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Energy stocks rode a jump in oil prices today to push Canada's main stock index to a record close as it kicked off a new month. Here's a look at the numbers as we head to commercial break.
The weather update is brought to you by Tourisme Gaspésie. Plan your stay in Gaspésie at tourismegaspésie.com and enjoy extraordinary moments.
All right, Jay is back with one last look at the weather, and boy, we've got a nice little stretch of sunshine and some warm temps.
Yeah, nice to see those temperatures on the rise. The sunshine is a welcome thing. Really wish we could see it during the weekend, not so much during the week. But for folks that maybe work through the weekend, this isn't that bad of a thing. And it does keep things nice and green. The grass isn't crunchy. That's a very, very good thing for our growers and for keeping that fire risk low. And it is low to moderate now, which was nice to see on a Monday, to see that has dropped over the weekend. That's the silver lining to the heavier rain and the unsettled conditions we had to contend with. So as we take a look to tonight, we will see a clear sky through the overnight hours tonight. So if you are out and you look to the northern horizon, you may see a little bit of color, a celestial treat with, of course, the aurora borealis visible along the northern horizon tonight. Starting out with some sunshine, but some patchy fog is possible in the early morning. Aside from a few passing clouds in the afternoon, namely for eastern areas, it is mainly sunny conditions across the province. Into the overnight hours through Wednesday, we do see a few clouds starting to build into our neighboring province, into New Brunswick. Those do start to move in afternoon and then evening as we look to more mainland Nova Scotia, Cape Breton, through the day on Wednesday. Not expecting it to be overcast, but we'll say a mix of sun and cloud, and likely similar conditions as we look ahead to your Thursday as well. So for the HRM tomorrow, we are going to start out with a mainly sunny sky for 7 a.m. It's a light wind in the morning, but it does begin to pick up towards the noon hour, 10 to gusting over 20 kilometers per hour. That's a warmer wind direction for inland areas, but if you're near a south-facing shoreline or coastline, could mean cooler temperatures for you if you're immediately downwind of the water. Not much of a change in the forecast aside from that wind picking up by late afternoon. Pretty nice conditions with temperatures likely around 2 o'clock at 20 in Halifax, possibly 21, 22 for more inland areas. So up into the low 20s for most of the province for your Tuesday, and even warmer conditions ahead for Wednesday and Thursday.
All right, we'll take it. Thanks, Jay. A hydrogen balloon that had to land in a swamp near Cardigan, PEI last week after attempting to cross the Atlantic Ocean has been moved. It originally took off from Maine, headed for Europe, but the crew discovered a leak and came down in eastern PEI. There were 3 people on board, none of them hurt. The group behind it says it was trying to become the first craft of its kind to cross the Atlantic. The balloon was severely damaged on the landing, putting a halt to the trip for now. And that is it for us tonight. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.